Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the July 28th meeting of the Brentwood Rotary Club. My name is Drew Rogers, and I have the privilege of serving the club as president of the club this year. Welcome to our visitors, and our guest speaker, General Skrmetti. Thank you all for being here today. We will get started by asking Hunter McCarty to come up and deliver the invocation, and then David Carden will deliver our pledge and four-way test. Hunter?
Thank you, Drew. Please pray with me. We invoke your blessing on this meeting and upon our being together. We acknowledge that wherever we go, we are always in your presence. We pray that our actions may reflect this awareness for whatever our future will bring. Help us during our struggles for justice and truth to confront one another without hatred or bitterness, and to work together with mutual forbearance and respect. Today, let us remember our fellow Rotarians that are in need of healing. Give your power of healing to those who minister to their needs. Thank you for this good group and for letting us know that those great among us must first become great in serving others. Bless us with the pure pleasure of service and the joy of giving. Bless our fellowship today and bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies and us to your service. Amen.
Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. The first, is it the truth? The second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And the fourth, beneficial to all concerned.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Thank you, Hunter. Before we go to the introduction of guests with our club secretary, Jennifer Bourne, for those of you that are unfamiliar with our club or are new to our club, you will know that we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. And so one of the things that I am doing is I'm going to bring you back 50 years ago today and what was happening in the world today in the year that our club was founded, again, 50 years ago. Is Curry here? Curry's not here. I was curious how close Watkins Glen, New York is from Detroit, because 50 years ago today, 600,000 people attended the Summer Jam. The Summer Jam was in Watkins Glen, New York. It was the largest ever audience to date at a pop festival, and it was headlined by the Grateful Dead, the band, and the Allman Brothers. So I just have a picture of Curry Andrews attending the Summer Jam 50 years ago, not knowing that 50 years from then he would be sitting here in a Rotary meeting. But there you go. So with that, Jennifer Bourne, if you will, please introduce our guests and visiting Rotarians.
Yes, we've got lots of guests today, and my job's really easy today because they're all guests of birth. All right, somebody else put some effort into this. Clark Hildebrand, who's visiting us, he's actually a member of the Morning Club, and he works in the same office with our speaker. And Matthew McCall, or I should say Matt, he's Chief Financial Officer for American Constructors, and they're located in Maryland Farms. And have Casey Powell, who is president of Thompson and Associates, and they are also located in Maryland Farms. Hint, hint. And a guest of our speaker, Khaki Kerrigan, who's in the back in the red dress, who I found out grew up 2 houses down from my mother-in-law. My kids used to go over and play with her when she was little. Let's see who else. I guess that's it.
Wonderful. Welcome. We're glad you're all here, and it is really convenient that you guys are located in Brentwood because we're in Brentwood. And you are always welcome to join us as a guest, but we would love to have you as a member of our club if you're so inclined. It seemed like you had a lot of friends here today, so just keep that in mind. But welcome. We are glad that you're here and hope that you enjoy your time with us. We do have an announcement today, actually several announcements. We did some of this last week and we missed an opportunity to recognize a member. We have several Paul Harris fellows that we need to recognize today. And for those of you that don't know, when we give to the foundation, we receive Paul Harris Fellow points. And when we've given on a cumulative basis $1,000, we become a Paul Harris Fellow. But then for every incremental $1,000 that is given, you add points to that. And so it's something that makes Rotary unique in giving to the foundation and recognizing those that give of their treasure to the foundation and the good work that is done by the foundation. So last week we tried to recognize Ted Alanchilian. And I saw him here today. So Ted, please come and accept your Paul Harris Fellow. All right. David Carden, we have Paul Harris Fellow +1. Please come forward, David. Brian Goss, Paul Harris Fellow +2. Alan Treadway, Paul Harris Fellow +1. And last, but certainly not least, we have Keely Hall with Paul Harris Fellow +8. Wonderful. Thank you all. Congratulations. And thank you for all of the good work that you do, both with the time that you spend with our club and your contributions to the foundation. I'm going to ask Stephen Hall to do Happy Bucks for us today. Stephen.
All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Who's feeling happy? Anybody? Mr. Kane. Super happy up here.
I said I wasn't going to do anything on golf this week, give you a week off, but I got to do something. So I've got $5 that I'm going to put in the pot today. That represents, y'all listen, the 5 new hole sponsors that Bart King sold last week. Now, on top of that, he gave me a list standing out there. He said, oh, yeah, that doesn't include blah, 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 blah. He listed 6 more that he said I should be getting. Okay. Now, so I asked him, well, God, Bart, that's unbelievable. What did you do? Guess what he said? I just asked my church buddies, my friends, my relatives, my neighbors, anybody that I know that I just thought, hey, would you help my Rotary Club out? We're having a golf tournament and all the funds go back in there. Sure, we'll help you. So there is some big truth in this just ask, and that proves it right there. So Bart, thank you so much. You'll get your gift certificate next week. We'll talk about that because you're the first winner of the incentive plan for the gift certificate. So thank you very much.
Nice job, Bart.
Well done.
I just want to say I'm excited about General Scrimetti speaking, but I was thrilled when I saw Clark when I walked in. I've known Clark for years and his family, great great young man. He serves the public with his great intelligence and hard work and very, very proud of him. So thank you for being here as well, Clark.
I have another one of those moments where I'm happy on the one hand, not so happy on the other. Back from 4 weeks in Scotland with kids and grandkids. Not so happy to be back with 97-degree temperature. Great trip. The highest temperature we had over there was 61 one day. But it was a great trip. My daughter got to attend the Scottish coronation of the king. It's at about 30 feet from me. Pretty cool.
Wow.
And I got to make a one-day trip to London and had a private tour of the House of Lords. And if you look up pictures of the House of Lords, the Lord Swire that was giving me the tour pointed back at the throne that's in the House of Lords, and he said, "I bet that outdoes Mar-a-Lago."
All righty, all righty. There's a hand coming.
Okay, I'm happy, I'm sad, and I need counseling. My daughter's going to Japan because that's been her dream. So she's moving there for 2 years, working for the Japanese government in international diplomacy. So I'm extremely happy. I'm sad because I'm going to miss her and I need counseling. I also need counseling because I enrolled my son at the University of Alabama.
Boo.
All righty, coming on.
Boo.
I heard American Constructors mentioned earlier, and I have one good friend and had two good friends that were involved in American Constructors. Both of them, were they both your uncles? I guess they would have been, right? They were. Joanne Rogers, Sonny Rogers, and now Derek Martin, I think, is he the president of the company? And so a fine outfit, and I'm happy to say I know those guys. So thank you.
Very good. Anybody else?
Does anybody have any money for Alan?
Oh, he's got cash. I see
Does
the
anybody
wallet.
have
out.
any money for Alan? Anybody willing to contribute?
Hey, I was just gonna say, hotty toddy, going 12-0. 12-0 this year. Got my tickets to Atlanta.
I
The
don't
football
know
talk has
that we
begun.
can do anything else after that. Wonderful. Stephen, thank you. Yeah, good luck with that, Alan. I wish you the best. Before we get to introducing our speaker, we've made a couple of announcements about Jeff Brown. I did want to kind of close the loop for you guys because Jeff called earlier this week. He is doing much better. He actually wanted to be here today, but he had therapy that was going to prevent him from being here. So he's very encouraged about his progress. My hope is that he will be able to join us. He is not able to drive until after Christmas, but it's looking better that he might be able to join us in a meeting in the upcoming future. So please continue to keep him in your prayers. With that, Bert Radford, I'll ask you to come and introduce our speaker.
Now, I'm really going to lower this for our speaker, Jonathan. Our speaker today is Johnson, who's the Attorney General for the state of Tennessee. He was appointed to this role in September of last year. And prior to his current role, he was Chief Counsel to Governor Bill Lee and Chief Deputy General predecessor, Tennessee Attorney General Herbert Slattery. Before working for the state of Tennessee, General Scrimetti was a partner with the Butler Snow law firm in Memphis. His legal career began nearly a decade as a federal prosecutor. He worked as a civil rights division at the Main Justice Office and then at Violet Prosecuting Corrupt Government, Violent White Supremacists. In addition to General Scarametti, he taught cyber law as an adjunct professor at the University of Memphis School of Law. General Scarametti earned his honors degrees from George Washington University, the University of Oxford, and Harvard Law School, where he was editor-in-chief of the Harvard Law Journal of Law and Public Policy. Following law school, Johnson clerked for Judge Stephen Colleton on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit District. He lives in Franklin with his wife Alicia and helping raise 4 children. And so let's welcome Jonathan Scarametti, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what my office does, a few things that we're working on, but we cover a lot. So I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions because there are a lot of different things we're doing that y'all may want to know about, and I don't want to talk too much about something that you don't care about. But as the Attorney General, I'm the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for Tennessee, Chief Legal Officer. So we represent the state in virtually every case. We don't do criminal prosecutions except when they involve district attorneys or judges, basically. But otherwise, if the state gets sued, if the state needs to sue somebody, or if there's a criminal appeal, it comes through my office. At any given time, we've got about 13,000 cases going. I have about 190 attorney spots. We got to fill a few of them, and about 360 employees total, most of them in Nashville. But we have some pockets in Memphis, in Jackson, in Chattanooga, and in Knoxville as well. So we represent the state in every lawsuit that comes in. Sometimes that's a $300 pothole lawsuit where somebody's car gets a little bit banged up on a road that the state maintains. Sometimes it's a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit about the education funding formula. And then it's everything in between: employment cases, bankruptcy, tax litigation, all sorts of employment and tort stuff. We have a very active consumer protection division. Tennessee is proudly one of the best states in the country for consumer protection. And so the folks on that team tend to be involved in some of the big national litigation. Opioids was a situation where Tennessee was one of the lead states. That was where I cut my teeth on consumer protection when I was the chief deputy. And we ended up getting, I think we're up to like $55 billion nationally in settlements out of these companies. And Tennessee is obviously a very pro-business state. But part of being pro-business means creating an environment of accountability where people can trust that the system's going to work. And so when people step outside the lines, our consumer protection division is there to make sure that the people who get hurt are protected and to ensure that companies are honest in their conduct with customers. We also handle a lot of constitutional litigation. There have been an increasing number of lawsuits against the state alleging that all sorts of pieces of legislation are unconstitutional. I think if you go back a few decades, that would happen occasionally. This past year, it's happening constantly. A lot of cases involving transgender issues, a lot of cases involving First Amendment issues, a lot of cases involving the state-local relationship. So we've had some people working very hard at that. Clark Hildebrand just secured a massive, massive win in one of those cases. We had the ACLU, Lambda Legal, New York law firm acting pro bono, and the U.S. Department of Justice all suing Tennessee over the law that was passed last year, HB 1, that prohibits medical interventions for juveniles dealing with gender issues. So it says if you're under 18, your healthcare providers can't give you surgery. They can't put you on hormones. They can't put you on puberty blockers. I think this had come up about 5 times before. And every time it came up, the states that tried to prevent this lost, and the courts kept them from doing it. With Clark in the lead, we were the first state to win. So we have the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals saying, no, it is constitutional for states to prohibit that. We've got a ways to go, but I'm very confident that Clark's going to continue to provide amazing representation. That comes down to a more fundamental principle issue, which is what is the role of the federal government and what is the role of the state government? And in our country, we're all Americans. We all pledge allegiance to the flag, but our Constitution is explicitly a document creating a limited government. The federal government is supreme, in its appropriate areas, but it's limited in what it can do. And the reserve of that power is exercised by the states. And ultimately, both the state and federal governments are accountable to the people. And so one of the things that we've been doing more of, and we're going to do a lot more of it, is proactively pushing back against federal overreach. We have a mindset in Washington right now that is essentially, why bother pushing laws through Congress when we can just pass the same thing through regulation and make people do it? The problem with that is it's illegal. And it tends to regularly infringe on the right of Tennessee's government to create laws for the people of Tennessee. And so we're setting up a strategic litigation unit. The governor and the General Assembly very generously funded it. And we're going to have a team of lawyers whose job is to push back against the federal government by commenting on proposed regulations, by litigating over these things, by defending the state when there are federal interventions, like in the transgender pediatric ban case. So I'm excited about that. It's important structurally because over time, you've seen more and more power get concentrated in the federal executive branch. And our entire system was designed to keep power from being concentrated anywhere. The whole point of the federal system and separation of powers is that every part of the government at each level of government provides a check for the other parts. So there's accountability, there are limitations, and nobody is able to amass the kind of power that lets them do whatever they want without having to answer to the people. And we've seen a dangerous drift structurally toward a more and more powerful federal government, and particularly the federal bureaucracy. And so it is an appropriate and natural thing for the states to push back against that. And I'm proud that Tennessee is going to continue to be one of the leading states doing that. But at the end of the day, the most fundamental part of my job is making sure that when the state needs a lawyer, the state has a good lawyer. And so we are constantly working to improve quality, hire great people, keep great people. We just gave some pretty big raises, but that's because we lost 25% of our attorneys last year. The market here is pretty hot. The state's pay wasn't so hot. And so I'm working to bridge that gap, but we need good people. And so the final thing I'll say before I kick it over to questions is, if you know any attorneys who are interested in serving the state, we are hiring. It's a great place to work. We got a great community there, great culture. They get to work on important cases and they get to be reasonable people too. I mean, we work really hard, but unlike at a law firm where if things slow down, you start to get nervous, you know, state employees do get to take vacations from time to time, come back and work. And so there's a work-life balance there that does help offset the very, very, very large salary differential. So if you know anybody who might be interested, I'd love to talk to them. We constantly need good people. And with that, I'm happy to throw it open to questions. Look forward to explaining whatever you want to know about our office.
In part of your opening, you mentioned, I think I heard the number about 13,000 cases, give or take, at any reasonable time. What percentage of those is the breakdown between the state taking the action and the state being the recipient of the lawsuit?
So it's a little tricky because about 5,000 or 6,000 of them are bankruptcy cases, and I'm not sure which side those fall on. But you know, outside of the bankruptcy context, probably 95% are defensive cases. We have Medicaid fraud enforcement, which has been in the news some lately. We have consumer protection, and we sue the federal government from time to time. But most of our work is done defending all the different cases that come in against the state.
So how in the legal system did we all of a sudden forget like that, like if I say I'm a girl, that's okay? Because normally that would have been like fraud. So how did we like have legislation that defends the fact that I could stand up and say I'm a girl?
So the short answer is we don't have legislation. And this is a really significant problem with the way our government's been working lately. Rather than put it to the people and say, is this what the law should be? Do we want to allow all these expanded rights for people to change their gender and force other people to recognize that? Should we allow boys who identify as girls into the girls' locker room? Should we allow boys who identify as girls to play on girls' sports teams? Rather than put it to the people, they've constantly tried to say that laws that were written 50 years ago require this sort of thing, which is just a square attack on democracy. There are many areas where this has been a problem, but I think none more so than the transgender area, because it's something people care a lot about and where the changes are incredibly radical. I mean, you look back over thousands of years, we've done things the same way, and then all of a sudden, we're supposed to have this entirely different approach to gender and say, oh, no, it's not that there's this binary and everybody is born either boy or girl, but it's a spectrum and people are allowed to switch back and forth, and we need to respect that. The laws that were passed never contemplated that that was going to be our approach. And so you have judges and bureaucrats who, and I don't think they would put it this way, but fundamentally what they do is say, we know better than the people what the law should be. And, that undermines the legitimacy of our democratic system. That's the big issue. Like in any of these cases, my job is not to say what the right answer is. My job is to represent the state. And so there are debates in the legislature about what the law should be, and whatever way they come down, that's the law that is. As long as it's consistent with the federal and state constitutions, me and my office are going to defend it. We're going to act appropriately to support it. But where there's not that democratic decision-making, where there's no federal law on point, but all of a sudden people are saying, no, the law requires you to do these things, or no, the law that you have passed as a state of Tennessee is unconstitutional because it prohibits girls from playing, or prohibits boys who identify as girls from playing on the girls' team. We push back against that because it's ultimately a threat to our democracy. You can't change what words mean. The whole reason that the words in our laws matter is because people voted for them. Same thing with our Constitution. It's not some magical document. I love our Constitution. It is a great document that was very well thought out, but it is not something that offers unlimited power to the people who pick it up and say, I know what it says better than you do. At the end of the day, everything in our system is dependent on the consent of the governed, and every law that we have is dependent on the will of the people. And so in the transgender case, there are folks who, either because they feel very strongly about the underlying policies, or because they feel very strongly that the law should reflect these modern sensibilities and the law should change without regard to what was voted on originally. They want to create a system where a small group of people are able to say what the law is. I think, and the General Assembly certainly wants me to vigorously pursue the idea that the people make the law. The law comes from the people, and anything that deviates from that chips away at the foundation of our system's legitimacy and is ultimately going to result in the kind of lawlessness that hurts everyone.
What are some of the more significant lawsuits currently underway involving federal overreach?
Clark, can you tell me if I miss any? He's been a key part of a lot of this. We're suing the U.S. Department of Education over some guidance they put out with respect to transgender issues. There's a proposed rule that we haven't sued over yet, I think, from Department of Education. We are going to file a comment on some proposed Health and Human Services rules, also related to largely gender issues. We sued the Department of Agriculture, and we got a ruling from the district court that said that the rules that they were passing were not as broad as some people thought they were. So we took that as a win, even if we didn't actually get the win on substance. That was one where some people were concerned that the discrimination prohibition in food stamps meant that schools could not do things like say that boys who identify as girls can't go in the girls' locker room. And we got the court to say, of course, it doesn't say that. That's ridiculous. And we said, okay, we'll take that as a win. We sued the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission over some guidance that the chairman issued. The federal government conceded that one. There's some environmental stuff we're suing over, the Waters of the United States rule. And that's a little complicated because the US Supreme Court just issued a decision with respect to the latest rule, which knocks us back to the previous rule that we were suing over until the new rule came into effect. So that one's a little convoluted, but we're pushing back there. We've got comment letters out with respect to a bunch of different EPA proposed rulemakings. And the comment letters are important for two reasons. The first is sometimes it makes a difference. Sometimes you say this is illegal and here's why. And the folks in the federal bureaucracy look at it and say, gosh, we better work more on this to make it legal. The other thing it's good for is laying down a marker so that we can file suit later with respect to federal overreach. And so there's a lot of environmental regulation coming from the EPA. There's environmental regulation coming from the Federal Trade Commission, which, you know, I think just the sentence there tells you what the problem is with that. Clark, am I missing any? Oh, yeah. We're suing ATF over the pistol braces and what was the other one? Is there another one? Oh, yeah. So bump stocks, you probably know this, but they're an attachment that you can put on a rifle that makes it essentially use the recoil to keep shooting. And the problem with that is the law that gives the ATF regulatory authority doesn't cover bump stocks, and any agency only has authority to the extent that it's legislatively authorized. And so we've had a few issues with the pistol braces for years and years and years. ATF said they're no problem, that they don't violate the act. Go ahead and use them. They're great for shooters with disabilities. And then all of a sudden they did a total 180 and said, no, these are dangerous and illegal. And that's a question for Congress. I mean, a lot of these things, I have strong opinions about a lot of it, but I acknowledge that there's another side. There's a debate to be had. People should discuss what the right policy is, but that discussion has to happen through our elected representatives in Congress. And more you see these agencies essentially usurping the role of the legislature. And so in the long run, we need to reinvigorate the legislature to make sure that we have a democracy. And so that's a survey of some of the federal litigation. You can expect more. Some of it's really weird and obscure. And some of the stuff that we're going to do in the near future, I think fits that category. But in those cases, it's because these regulations deal with pretty important principles and they're good vehicles for litigating the broader question. So if you see something super weird come out of our office involving a suit against the federal government, you should probably expect that, there's a principle at stake that's important, even if the actual issue seems kind of trivial. Oh, and I apologize. Speaking of issues that aren't world changing, but they're important. There's a lot of proposed regulation involving household appliances. So dishwashers, washing machines, refrigerators. And so we're pushing back on that. We led the comment letters on it. I anticipate a decent likelihood of litigation there. And it's just another instance where the federal agencies are overreaching their statutory authority. Yes, sir.
Critical race theory.
Yeah, we just got sued yesterday, actually. There was a bill that passed last session that limits what teachers can teach in the classroom. It says you can't, this is not a verbatim recital of what the law says, but the gist of it is you can talk about history, but you can't promote ideas such as one race is, I forget what the exact wording, one race is the oppressor, one race is the oppressed. The teachers aren't allowed to promote a certain set of divisive concepts. And First Amendment law is pretty complicated. And drafting First Amendment related laws is pretty complicated. So I don't want to make any guarantees about that one. But I think the fundamental idea that the state can regulate what teachers teach is legitimate. I mean, if somebody wanted to go in there and say, Maoist China is the model and you should all adopt that and, embrace these ideas, that's obviously a problem. It's up to the elected officials to decide where the line's drawn. And there are limits. There is academic freedom. There are First Amendment issues there. But the First Amendment issues don't preclude the state from setting the guardrails and saying, here's what teachers should be talking about in the classroom. And I know there's a number of other laws that have been passed. We're probably going to get sued about some of those at some point too, but it's something that's very much on the legislature's mind. Yes, sir.
One of the things you've mentioned, and I think we all generally understand, is that Tennessee's become known nationally as being business friendly. As that's happened, obviously, we feel, particularly in Williamson County, the influx and the growth of corporate presence, a lot of it being relocation based. As that has happened, particularly over the last decade, how difficult is it for your office to keep up with the volume of not necessarily litigation, but regulatory issues and legislative issues that, you know, kind of keep Tennessee in a business friendly climate while still balancing off that consumer protection?
It's really hard. I mean, the population has flown up here. My office has expanded, but not that much. I talked to Paul Summers, who was the AG back at, 2000. And I think he said he had about 170 attorneys. So given the growth in the state, we're definitely lagging behind. A lot of the regulatory work initially goes through the state agencies. So we work with them usually to the extent that they want us to, which sometimes is a lot and sometimes isn't that much. But, keeping up with legislation, particularly last session, was really hard. They had, I think, 1,200 bills go through. And there were a few that were really significant and that we were very involved in, which means there was less bandwidth there to pay attention to everything else. So it's a constant struggle. I think we tend to do a pretty good job. Speaking of businesses coming in, though, one other area that we've been looking hard at and working on is ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. And there's this big movement in the corporate world, you probably all know this, to adopt policies that are more policy oriented. So you get these companies that are really embracing one side of the political debate and pushing hard in various ways. Sometimes it's fairly anodyne, sometimes it's probably illegal, sometimes it's in a gray area in between. But the big issue from our perspective is antitrust. If you've got a small group of companies that either control a huge part of the finance market or a huge part of the information market or a huge part of the media market or any other market, and they are forcing people who want to have access to that, especially access to finance, to adopt certain policies. It's basically legislation without going through the legislature and without accountability to the people. And so we're using the antitrust laws to look at a lot of that and just keep people honest. I mean, companies are allowed to make a wide range of choices and they're allowed to give consumers a wide range of choices, but they're not allowed to limit those choices by abusing their market power, and they're not allowed to lie about it. Thank you. So that is another significant effort we're taking. Yeah, we're definitely aware that insurance is one of the affected industries there. And it's a concerted effort, and it's by people who recognize that there is a fairly concentrated degree of power in these industries. And so it's easy if you just convince a few people. It's a lot easier to change the world that way than it is by persuading the broad population of America and getting it to elect folks that support these policies. The only problem is it's really wrong to do it that way. I mean, ultimately, you are building a house on sand when you force these policies on people. You got to make your arguments, and if you persuade people, great. And if you don't, that's our system, and you move on.
Speaking of First Amendment, I put you back there into the place where it's a difficult decision about book banning. What's your advice to the legislature as far as they're making decisions versus parents making decisions about which books their children read?
So the Supreme Court addressed this in the 70s in a case where Justice Brennan, who's probably the most liberal justice we've had in quite a long time, big First Amendment guy, he wrote the case called PICO, which lays out the criteria for removing books from school libraries. And it says if it's not age appropriate or if it's not suitable for the educational mission of the school, then of course there's no problem with taking the books out. And then the question is, who makes those decisions? The legislature has the authority to put that power in a variety of places. This is not me speaking as the attorney for the state, but just personally, having looked at this and having worked on the issue a little bit with the governor, I think you're always better off keeping it local. I mean, the school boards are elected to run the schools in their district. Different communities have different community standards. And if you have the entire state and everybody's trying to adopt a single uniform standard, from my perspective, it's bad because it means a lot more lawsuits. But I think there's something to be said for local governance. You know, it's another way of keeping power from being concentrated. Now, the way our system's set up, you know, the states have sovereignty, the federal government has limited sovereignty, and then in each state, there's a separate determination about where to go. We've got a home rule amendment in our constitution, but it's a pretty limited home rule amendment. So the state is very much the locus of power. So it's up to the state to decide how much it wants to delegate to the local school boards. But I mean, I think we've all seen school board elections get a lot more contentious lately, in part because they do have a role to play in deciding what materials are going to be available in the schools.
So AI is a hot topic, and with you discussing the lack of manpower you have, do y'all leverage AI currently, or is there investments into AI to maybe help with some of that, or what are your thoughts and how that's being used in the law industry?
So I think it's going to have a huge, huge, huge impact in the law industry. I think if you're a young lawyer in a law firm right now, you should be very nervous because a lot of the young lawyer tasks like basic research and basic drafting are probably going to get taken over by computers in the next few years. You know, there are huge risks with AI, and I think we need to be really careful not to surrender too much power to the algorithms and to the people who create the algorithms. But at the same time, for things like analyzing large data sets, for things like doing basic legal research, for things like adapting a set of facts to a basic template that a person can then refine, it's a huge labor-saving device for the law. Maybe not yet. I know some law firms are starting to adopt it. I don't know that it's quite there yet, but I think to be competitive with the people on the other side, we're going to have to figure out how to leverage that down the road. So I've got a couple people looking at it now. I'm very interested. And my dad was actually a Defense Department contractor working on AI since back in the 80s. So it's something that, you know, I've been cognizant of for a while. I'm also very cognizant of the risks. And having just gone on about how bad federal regulation is and how we're going to fight them, I did co-sign a letter with Virginia's Republican AG and the Democratic AGs of Colorado and Connecticut, calling for the federal government to come up with a good strategy on this, because I think we really need to be thoughtful and careful about it. And it's one of those few things that potentially could be bipartisan, because everybody knows there's huge potential benefit. Everybody knows there's huge risks, and we can't take our time too much because the technology is moving at an unbelievably fast rate. But we got to be thoughtful and make sure that we're not doing anything that cripples our development and lets China get ahead of us. But at the same time, we got to put some guardrails up, make sure that we're not surrendering too much power, make sure that there's a human check on everything, and make sure that there's transparency about where AI is being used. So there's a big rush right now in Congress. I know Senator Blackburn has been looking a lot at these issues, in part because there's so many copyright issues involved. So, I mean, that's going to be the hot area for the next couple of years, and it's very much top of mind for me.
General Skrmetti, thank you for being here first. I appreciate what you've shared with us. And I think you touched on this a moment ago, but I'd like to hear more about what you have to say about this. And I'm not asking you to make a political statement. I'm asking for kind of the legal perspective on this, but contrast kind of what's happening with some of the lawsuits against the federal government for overreach with what's happening within Davidson County and the dynamic between Davidson County and the state. Sure thing.
So remember, I just said that in Tennessee, the state has an awful lot of power and the localities don't have a lot of power. You know, you could draw an analogy between the two. Legally, they're very differently situated. Legally, the state has sovereignty. The federal government is explicitly limited. And when the federal government does something that interferes with what the state's legitimately trying to do, the state should push back. In Tennessee, the powers of the metro governments and of municipalities are entirely subject to the state. The powers of any ancillary entity. So for instance, the school districts, potentially, well, I don't want to say what else might be because we'll probably have a lawsuit about it down the road. But according to some recent Tennessee Supreme Court law, if it's not actually the county that's being affected, then the home rule amendment to our Constitution doesn't apply. And so, and the state has all the power to pass laws covering basically everything until it bumps into a constitutional constraint. So when the municipalities try to do something that the state doesn't like, the state legally absolutely can stop them from doing it. When the counties do something the state doesn't like, even though we have home rule, the state can pass general laws that prevent the stuff it doesn't like from happening. So, you know, there are all sorts of philosophical arguments about subsidiarity that says you want to push as much power down as you can to be as close to the people as possible. And, you know, there's a good argument to be had there, but legally, that's just not where we're at. And so you've seen a bunch of lawsuits come up. You know, I don't want to make any predictions about how they're going to go, but we certainly feel like there are strong defenses for the state in those lawsuits. You know, at a broader level, I hope that the relationship between Nashville in particular and the state cools off a little bit, because I think there's a lot of alignment in terms of benefits to everybody. But you know, I recognize there are legitimate grievances. I recognize that it is not my job to say what the outcome should be. But, you know, just speaking as a Williamson County resident, it would be nice if folks could focus on continuing the things that bring tons of money into the state, because we need that. And I do worry that if it gets really politically contentious, people are putting politics ahead of the common good. And you know, Metro does not need to be. So I'm not elected, and I got to be careful what I say about things. You know, there was an obvious provocation that set all this off that was totally gratuitous, and I hope everybody can get back to a place where we can focus on the good. And the other thing I do want to mention, because I came from Memphis and I love Memphis dearly, and Memphis is having a really hard time right now. You know, I hope that the state is able to continue to work. And you know, Mayor Strickland in Memphis has a great relationship with the General Assembly. He, you know, visits the governor regularly, and, you know, the governor is very attuned to West Tennessee too, which is good because we have real needs there. It's like 18% of the state GDP in Shelby County, and they are having a very difficult time. So you know, I hope the state's able to have a good relationship with all the different component pieces, because it benefits everybody.
General Skrmetti, thank you for being here. I just received a text from our former president, Jane Covington, and she wanted me to ask you on a lighter note, has the state of Tennessee ever been sued by Morgan & Morgan?
You know, we probably have. We actually, they were in the opioids litigation, so we'd see some of their folks at the big negotiations. It was like literally the most complicated litigation in American history. And so there are a bunch of these plaintiffs lawyers grouped there. And I remember it was very humbling. It's the first time I'd ever flown on a private plane. We took the state plane up to Cleveland for the settlement negotiation, and I was feeling like such hot stuff. You know, it made financial sense. It would have been more expensive for us to fly up on commercial and stay 2 nights there. But I felt very privileged. I was the chief deputy attorney general. We were flying up to Cleveland to negotiate this multi-billion-dollar deal, and we were on our own plane, and it was great. And then we came in for a landing, and we saw the plaintiffs' lawyers' planes, and they were just lined up this row. I mean, they were like $60 million airplanes, and there were a lot of them. And I felt a lot less good about myself at that point. But no, you know, we run into Morgan & Morgan sometimes. Yeah, Bart Durham actually got his start in the Tennessee Attorney General's office. All right. Thank y'all so much.
General Skermetti, thank you for being here. It's important for us to be informed citizens and it's necessary for us to have people like you and appreciate your service to our state to come talk to us and to hear directly from you on what's happening within the state of Tennessee. I do have something that I want to, I'm not doing a very good job as I come into the presidency of the Brentwood Rotary Club, so please forgive me. Ordinarily, we would have a pen for you that would be a gift. I did order them after last week. I discovered last week I did not have any pens, and I did order them, but they're not here yet. But I will get you a pen that will be a gift that you can keep, and it will help you remember your time here with us. Again, my apologies that I don't have that, but I would ask you to do something for us in addition to speaking to us today. We have a book that we read to first graders here in Brentwood. And the book talks about the ideals of Rotary and the four-way test. And when we read this book to those children, we talk about your time here. And if you wouldn't mind signing that for us, that would be wonderful. And I do have because that's only fair. It just won't have anything about the Brentwood Rotary Club. In all seriousness, thank you very much, General Skermetti, for being here and for what you've shared with us today. I'd like to re-welcome those that are visiting us today. That's Khaki, Matt, Casey, and Clark. Thank you for being here. Remember, we're just down the street. You're in Brentwood, we're in Brentwood. Makes a lot of sense. Please help put away tables and chairs. We're going to stack in chairs and 7 or 8 high at the table, not the wall. Okay. Thank you all for being here. If there's nothing else for the good of Rotary, then we're adjourned.